Okay, so you started to talk a little bit about your writing environment, that you have to be at your desk. Do you use any visuals, or is it all in your head? Or?
No, the only thing, the only constants between, I have to have a room dedicated for writing, and in Florida and Indiana, the constants, I've got a quote from Josh Ritter on my desk, a framed quote, that I read before I write every day.
And it is?
It is, I sang in exaltation, pulled the stops, you always looked a little bored, but I'm singing for the love of it, have mercy on the man who sings to be adored. And I just think that's a great summation of how you should approach any sort of art.
Well, and that's your philosophy on writing, right? You write
absolutely.
For you first.
I think, write because you love it first. Write the story that you love. Write for the story. That is, so I love that quote. I think it's just a beautiful summation of the mindset I want. So I'll read that, and then I always have to listen to music. Almost always. Very few exceptions. I'm listening to music.
And that's influenced all of your books, right? Music has
I've got
influenced?
soundtrack, or at least a few key songs that stand out for each book.
All right. You teach writing, so let's hypothetically say you're coming into your own classroom. We'll go with the little paranormal track that you're getting on. Looking at yourself as an instructor, what would you say is your greatest strength as a writer?
Looking at myself as an instructor, what would I say is my greatest strength as a writer?
As an instructor.
As if I'm evaluating my own work.
Right.
Okay, I've got you. Well, that's tough. I can point out 20 weaknesses. Let's see. I would hope that I can create emotional investment between the reader and the characters. That's certainly a foremost goal for me, so I would hope that it would be a strength. And I've always felt pretty comfortable with dialogue. I think that's something that some writers have a really good ear for. You look at Elmore Leonard, Richard Price, Dennis Lehane. They have a special gift for dialogue. I'm not at that level, but I've always felt comfortable writing dialogue.
Do you read out loud to yourself what you've written?
I read out loud when I'm doing my first round of copy edits. Until then, very rarely.
Okay. All right. Now, you said you can pick out 20 weaknesses, but tell me, as an instructor, what would you say to yourself would be the top area that you should work on?
The top area. Okay. Right now I've been trying, an issue of concern for me is how quickly do I get the story in motion. A lot of times, particularly when I'm working with standalones, the characters are new to me. And so I'm more concerned with building the character and atmosphere. I think So Cold the River certainly is a slow burn book. Part of that was conscious, but maybe it burns a little too slow. I'd like to be able to pick up story motion a little bit faster than I do right now. So that was the book I'm working on now. I'm trying to make that a foremost concern. Am I getting into the story quick enough? And then the atmosphere and character should be running parallel to that, not ahead of it.
Okay. So as a writer at this point, you've accomplished a lot of things that people towards the end of their careers are accomplishing. So where do you want to go? What goals do you have set out for yourself for the next 5 books that you already are committed to?
Just literally to try and write a better book each time out, and to make sure that it's a story that I really feel that sort of emotional investment in. I think that's where good work comes from. I can't think of anything. The only period where I really felt that I was having trouble reading detective fiction for fun anymore was when I was writing The Silent Hour. And I think, you can see I was writing a book about a very fatigued detective. And there was probably no small amount of a writer who was growing fatigued with writing, the same character. So I needed a break, and I think that was evident in some ways in the book. But that was the only time I really have had trouble reading detective fiction, and now, that I'm writing in a different genre, I can go back and read all of my PI favorites again. So.
Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about So Cold the River then. Now, You've been talking in a number of places about the catalyst for So-Called the River. So why don't you just give us a general background on how this book came to be?
The catalyst is the place, the towns of West Baden Springs and French Lick, the history. These were thriving destinations, international destinations, for a very short period around the turn of the century that died off pretty quickly with the Depression. And the history and the folklore of the area was so rich that I'd known for a long time I wanted to write a book about it. And it was just a matter of finding a story that worked with the setting and with the history. And I knew I wanted to pair the past and the present. And a ghost story allowed me to do that in what felt like a very organic way, and kept some of the, what I feel is an inherent creepiness of the place.
Well, now you've said you wanted to write about this area for a while. What was the trigger that made now the time that was right?
It was really just the moment I decided that I wanted to try a supernatural story, try a ghost story. And what led to that, I can't really say. I read Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill, and I thought, this is a writer just having a tremendous amount of fun with what he's doing. It's a very good book, but I also could just feel how much fun he was having. And that was at a point where I wasn't having as much fun anymore with the detective novels. I was feeling a little bit of burnout. And so I thought I'd write a ghost story novella to take a break and to try and have that much fun. And I did have that much fun for 500 pages. So.
And you started out as a novella.
Right.
So what was the kernel? What was the idea that you thought would only be a novella? And then what made it take off to 500 pages?
Yeah, the kernel was the idea that some of the mythic reputation of Pluto water, of this mineral water, might not have just been folklore, that there might be something to it. And I thought I'd be able to contain that, to something really short. And it was once I met the characters, Eric's voice, but really Anne McKinney, that was the voice that I knew she was going to have a larger role in the book. And Josiah, as I brought in those point of view characters, I just fell in love with writing in those voices so much that I wanted to let it sprawl. And so what I'd originally envisioned as a really tight, short narrative became something that I wanted to really let grow.
Now you had a hinting of a female voice in Envy the Night. Not as strong as it is in So-Called the River. How did that change, or did it change anything for you as far as writing?
That's interesting. I would actually, in terms of weight of the book, in terms of pages, I would think that Nora maybe has a higher role in Envy the Night, but Frank is much more clearly the protagonist of that book. So-Called the River is Eric's book, but Anne has a very defined arc too. Writing from a female perspective is a nice challenge for a male writer, but you ought to be able to embrace those challenges, and that's really, you want to push yourself toward things that are away from your own set of life experiences, and that's what good fiction is all about. So.